No, we're about to be on this. I never do this right. I never do it right. But it's like Instagram is weird where it doesn't. We're live on Facebook now and we're live on YouTube. But Instagram is weird where you have to click in the key, then you have to click the go live after you go live and whatnot. But y'all, we are in episode 11 of the Crown by Nichele podcast. I am your host, Ryan N. Jenkins, and you probably heard some of the tail end of that conversation. I am truly excited about our episode today. But before I even get into the episode and the purpose, I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves because I'll admit this is the first time I brought on guests I don't know, but they were highly recommended by people I do know and trust. So I'm going to let Jay, if you want to start off by introducing yourself.
Okay, hey, I won't say too much. I'm not long-winded, hopefully. Jay-Z Little, Z is for Zachary, but owner of Ford Counseling and Consultant here in Columbia, South Carolina. We have safe spaces for boys and men that we put on quarterly. Our next one will be, I think, the third week of December, Space for Men, primarily black men and boys. We also have space for artists. We have therapy for artists. All these are free. All these are free things. We come in, we break bread, we connect. We talk about what's tough about, being an artist, a male or a boy, and then we talk about what's good about being that. Also, the executive director of Awesome Fathers. I have a daughter who is autistic. Started that this year. I've gotten a lot of traction. Really excited about that. But that is me in a nutshell.
Nice.
All right, and Zamir.
Yeah. Hey guys. I'm Zamir Andrews. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. Originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I think for me, I thank you for having me. First and foremost, I think for me, my passion has always lied with motivating, giving knowledge to those coming up after me. I think my life goal is about legacy and, being able to, give back to the voiceless because, I come from, a ruthless, environment, and, in an environment that doesn't, call for positive conversations like these. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, my mission in life is just to, give back, soak up as much game as possible and to be able to cultivate environments, cultivate communities, and, cultivate, dialogue that creates legacy, that creates the enhancement of our people. And, so I just thank everybody for, joining in. And, I'm hopeful that, we can have a dialogue and discussion tonight, that really creates, legacy.
Mm-hmm. So I am just truly excited, and as I've shared with them and a few others, because after I finally confirmed you, all these other guys chimed in, was like, I would love to do that, and I was like, well, we'll have to do another day. We have to do another day because I'm pretty sure we'll have different perspectives. I think the same goal, but we'll have a different way to reach the goal. So what sparked this episode, Boys Before Men, is I had the awesome, dope privilege of meeting Jason Reynolds, a world-renowned author. If you have not read anything by him, you need to get on it. So he just released a new book called 24 Seconds From Now. And he admits that it's definitely for ages 14 and up because this young man is about to embark on his first time with his longtime girlfriend of 2 years. It does not go into the situation, but it does go into the emotional state behind it, his life leading up to that moment. And there was something that he said that sparked a question for me that I asked. And the question, the discussion he said was, as he was prepping and doing some research for this book, he found himself, so apparently there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube for Truth and Dares, and it would always end with a couple, and it was somebody always filming it, but it will always end with the male, when he would go to kiss the girl, would always end with a kiss. Instead of like being tender about it, it was like he would go to grab her throat to kiss her. And his thing was, why where's the tenderness, where's being romantic, where's it being a certain way that you should treat a young lady? Then I immediately went to from my 20 years of teaching, one of the things we constantly had to deal with in the hallways is the boys roughhousing the girls, and sometimes it was their girlfriend, and when you would go to stop it, it was like, oh, it's nothing wrong what he's doing, or the boy would be like, why are you even coming at me like that? I should be able to do whatever I want. And it's like, there's a certain way you should be dealing with her, and that's not the way you should deal with her. So then I posed the question to him on how can we as teachers, counselors, mentors combat that behavior. He said it shouldn't even be you, it should be the parents. So immediately I brought in these young men here to talk to us how we can better effectively raise our sons so they are, what's the word I want to say, just well-rounded. And I really feel like that's underwhelming what the point I'm trying to get across. But I have some questions for them. And the first question that I'm going to ask is, and I may jump all over the place, and again, I may come up with questions as we go. But one of the things that came to mind is, why do you think it's important for us to know our son's love language, and how can that affect his development? Anyone want to jump in?
Go ahead.
You got to go.
We're gonna toss it back. Okay, we'll toss it back and forth. So, I think number one, it's gonna create those secure attachment bonds, right? It will bring you closer to your son. If we're just always barking, be tough, be a man, especially when we're talking about young men up to a certain age. You know, there's a certain age where they do have to do different things and mature. Especially talking about young men, those young men still need tenderness. And I don't know if that's something that was traditionally taught in our communities. I think that one thing that I've had to reconcile in myself, and I won't say my whole family, but in my family, just seeing other things, is you can't blame someone for what they didn't receive and what they didn't see. And so, you know, you can try, or you can have a conversation, and, you know, whatever, however, but if they didn't see that, they really may not have that to give. There's one thing, but also you can learn from that. It gives you more effective emotional communication. I remember one time, this is me, I'm about to pass it on to you. I remember one time when I first started counseling, I was embarrassed because I was at this training, and they asked me to describe a situation. And the facilitator said, I gave my answer, and it was an answer I thought was okay. And the facilitator said, you know, well, sometimes, you know, people don't have the language. She was referring to me. She was doing it in a nice way. But, you know, sometimes people don't have the language to describe what's going on. And so I think that, you know, learning these children and learning these young boys emotional and love languages gives them another language. Because one thing we do see in private practice sometimes is, Mrs. Mick probably talk about this as well. Some of what we can do, or some of what it calls us to do, is give people that language to kind of express themselves fully. You know, when you say, you know, you don't care about, no, you care about some things. No, you feel happy, you feel sad. You've just been taught differently. But it supports healthy self-esteem and development, and a number of other things. Mr. Mick, I'm not trying to hold you up. Go ahead.
You good. No, you're good, brother. No, I think so. When we think about the question, I'm just going to repeat the question. Why is it important to know your son's love language and how it can affect his development? I think the key word in that is know. And know is short for, you know, can be short for knowledge. And I think that as men, as leaders, as parents, I think for us to be able to understand our child's love language is to already have an understanding of what a love language is. And I think one of the things that, you know, that is power, knowledge is power, but also applied knowledge is power. So back to Brother Jay's point, I think one of the key words that I thought about when looking at these questions was having the ability to model. Modeling is not only knowing what to do, but it's also an action. It's a word of action. So I think the biggest thing for us, as men, as fathers, as leaders, as it relates to understanding your child's love language, is actually being able to understand what love language is, what a love language is. This could mean, reading books. This could mean understanding through a spiritual lens, understanding through whatever research that you may come across. But it's also a matter of taking that knowledge that you've learned, modeling it so that whatever actions or behaviors that your son display, you're able to correct him. Not only correct him, but you're also able to help him understand what it is that he wants, what it is that he needs, and for him to understand how to actually carry out his behaviors in the way that is conducive for whatever environment that he comes across, whether it's with a young lady, whether it's to his mom, showing affection to his dad, showing affection to his parents, things of that nature. So I think, again, the biggest thing just goes back to that that idea of modeling.
And can I piggyback on that, because you made a good point when you said modeling. So I was thinking about like catering and validating his emotional needs, but also giving him that emotional intelligence for future relationships that he has, right? And so he's not stifled in his own emotions. And so if you're not withholding that, you allow them to feel these things. And so that, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you're not making a mistake because all that stuff goes up. You made a great point, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. And you as well, man. Thank you for providing a platform for me to piggyback off of that, man. Yes, sir.
So one thing I want to add to that, if you are not aware, if you're not aware of what your love, like you don't even know what, when I said love language, you don't even know what that was, definitely look that up. There's quizzes you can take online. I had learned I'm very needy because it was a lot of love languages that appealed to me. But it's very important for you to understand how your child operates and how they receive love. Because one thing I have learned over time is sometimes as parents, we love how we were loved, and that's not how our child needs to be loved. Right. So it's very important. If you do not know what that is, there's a book, but there's also a quiz you can take online that will, based on how you answer the questions, that will tell you what your love language is, and in your kids. And this is something that if I'm not mistaken, y'all, this is not something that sticks with you. That can change over time as you get older, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely, if you have never sit down as a family to experience that, I definitely strongly recommend that. So I'll admit I'm going to be going back and forth in screens because for whatever reason, Instagram does not post comments. And then for some reason, my comments from Facebook are not popping up either. So I'll be on different screens. But just please know, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We will respond to them. And I see more of you are tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. So my next question is, and I'm gonna just skip around. How has the misconceptions or misinterpretations of masculinity and femininity negatively affect how we raise our boys? And I'm gonna let y'all, the reason why I asked that question, because I realized, okay, there was two things. One, Jason Reynolds admitted how we don't allow our boys to really feel. We allow them to feel with certain things. I know me personally, I remember when my son would become upset and want to cry over something. What you crying for? And it's like, and I have a feeling it was me projecting what I think should be a certain type of behavior. And the reality is he was hurting. Something was really bothering him. So as a result, I should have let him cry and let him feel. So again, how have the misconceptions and misinterpretations of masculinity and femininity negatively affect how we raise our boys?
Yeah. I was just going to say, as it relates to masculinity and femininity, when we think of it as a two-way street. When we think of masculinity, we think having to be brute, having to be strong, having to be in a stance of authority. When we think of femininity, we think crying, sobbing. We think all of the characteristics as it relates to being a woman, right? But also, I think that it could be tricky, because I think the word that comes to mind, or the phrase that comes to mind, is emotional intelligence. And when we speaking from a man's perspective, it's great to be masculine. When you are masculine, you have traits of leadership. You're showing that you are authoritative, things of that nature. But also, it can be tricky, because when you're too masculine, in a sense, as it relates to this discussion, you can ignore, someone else's feelings, someone else's emotions. But where the femininity side comes in, at is being emotionally responsible, being emotionally intelligent. For an example, there's a book called Way of the Superior Man, and it talks about, being in your masculine frame, but also being emotionally available, so that you understand the underlying tones of what a female may be communicating to you. And what I mean by that is, okay, if if I'm masculine in a situation, or for an example, in our society, let's say in the context of a relationship, right? I am in the context of a relationship. Let's say I'm in a house, I'm in a house with my fiance or my wife, whatever, and I forget to lock the door, right? And she says, Zamir, why you ain't locked the door? My masculine frame is like, don't tell me I should be locking the door. Who are you talking to? Like, yo, that's my first response, right? That's the sort of the masculine side, or that's the perceived, let's say, masculine side. But the feminine side to that would be the feminine side to that would be for me to in a sense, understand, sort of where she's coming from, cater to her emotions in a sense of acknowledging that, taking my pride out of it, acknowledging that, but also understanding the underlying reason as to why she's telling me to lock the door. The reason that she's telling me not to lock the door is not because the door unlocked and somebody's going to run in, but the underlying reason to that is that she wants to feel safe. She wants to feel trusted. She wants to feel as though I'm her bright knight in shining armor, or whatever the phrase is. So I think, as it relates to masculinity and femininity, I think it's a matter of being in tune with your emotional side and having the emotional intelligence and the grace to understand the perspective of a person who's on the other side of masculinity. I know I sort of went into circles with that answer, but I hope it sort of conceptualizes the question that you asked.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Jay, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think masculinity and femininity are interesting terms.
Yeah.
So like masculinity, like we used to think masculinity was one thing. Like you had to be a caveman, right? You had to act a certain way. You had to, assert your dominance. You had to you had to curse. You had to do silly things, right? But I think that the pressure to be tough kind of inhibits like the emotional development of boys. The whole boys don't cry thing can create shame and guilt. I remember, my dad was, again, I'll share my own personal stories, right? Like my dad was like trying to make me a man. And I remember one time, and I tell the story to clients, friends, everybody, I was terrified of snakes. He may pick up a snake. Like I was like, why do I have to pick up a snake to prove I'm a man? Like it's just like weird things we do, just culturally. Like I don't like snakes, and so did that make me a man? Does that make me less of a man? Things of that nature. But again, masculinity can be a lot of things. You don't have to be, it's good if you can fix stuff around the house, but you don't have to be a guy that's submits to fix it. Like, that's a traditional role. You don't have to be somebody that fixes everything. It's good if you can. I've done tons of that stuff. It takes me a long time. I'd rather pay somebody else to do it. No offense. I'd rather pay somebody else to do it. But just masculinity, I think it is evolving in many different areas. And what I mean by that is for many different demographics and for different people, I am concerned where the term masculinity is going in this country and how it is being preached to different people and how it is being preached to different people. So, I think the real misconception about masculinity is, and especially one other thing, right? I don't want to go too far. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna stop. But like getting our boys to try to be these super masculine men way before their time. So that's my other thing. But I will stop right there.
You good.
He stopped right there because that's one of my questions. Like
stop right there. That's my pet peeve. That's my pet peeve. Go ahead. I'm sorry. So
it's just, and I'll admit, I got better as my son got older. Like when it was obvious he was frustrated. I remember, and my mother's watching this, I love you. But I remember being a point in time where you didn't suck your teeth, you didn't roll your eyes, you didn't huff and puff. But the reality is, us as adults, if we're frustrated, we're upset, we suck our teeth, we huff and puff. But if a child does that, you're being disrespectful. And it's not that I'm being disrespectful, I'm airing my frustration. I do believe you have to do it within levels, but even though you could tell he was upset about something, I would let him be upset. And I remember that for me, that just took time, just let him feel it out and feel how he felt about that. All right. So my next question, and matter of fact, we might just go straight into it, Jay. How has society adultified our Black boys? Did we play a role in it? And what can we do to combat it or reverse it?
Oh boy. What does it say it one more time? One more time. So it's how has society, go ahead.
So how has society adultified our Black boys? And we know they do it to our Black girls too. But we're talking about boys now. But how has society adultified our Black boys? And did we play a role in it, as in us Black people? And what can we do to combat it and make sure we're not doing that to our boys or allowing it to happen to them, if that makes sense?
That's a lot. So we're gonna try to break it down just a little. Okay, we'll try to remember it all.
Well, let's start with the first question.
All right.
How has society adultified our Black boys?
I mean, we make them, like men of the houses, and we try to say, like you're the big man, or even fathers. This ain't all women. We're equal opportunity line step. We equal opportunity. Man, that's my little man. And so like if it's, if it's your daughter, you don't want your daughter doing certain things, right? But if it's your boy, my boy was out there last night. Nah. Keep that same energy, because your boy can bring home the same thing that your daughter. So, it's always this, boys to men, like the name of the podcast, Boys Before Men. We do not give Black boys spaces to be themselves. And if we're doing that, we're stunning their growth, and we're wondering why they're still children at 30, 40, 50, and 60. So I would say that on question one. Go ahead.
Okay. Zamir?
I think our society, I think what we ingest, think about, it made me even think about this. Think about it. All of our when we look at an athlete have his interview, right? When we look at an athlete have his draft day interview, the first thing, or let's say you look at a kid, let's say you look at a kid that has aspirations on playing sports, that has aspirations on being a rapper, whatever. Their answer is to take care of my mom, take care of my family, take care of this, take care of that. So unconsciously, we already have this, we already have this idea that we have to take on the weight of the world from a very, very small age. So, going back to that made me think about that. So I would say, in our society, when we open up Instagram, when we open up Facebook, when we open up TikTok, I think that's the first thing that we see. Children has access to adult things, exposure, things of that nature. So I think it goes back to that, which is exposure, and what are we exposing our kids to? It could even be parents having a kickback at the house and the kids is downstairs playing like the parents, or playing with the parents, or I remember when I was growing up, there were times, I did grow up with an old school mom at times, but there were times where my mom didn't tell me to go upstairs, while her and her friends was downstairs, or whatever, So I think, it just comes down to exposure, and we have to be cognizant of what we expose our kids to, because, they'll take on the weight of the world when they shouldn't even have that responsibility.
And there were a lot of examples that I definitely identified that y'all just spoke on. Like, I'll never forget being hard on a young man. He was always late to school. We'll come to find out his dad was deployed, and he had to take the kids to school. I'll never forget a young lady who I'm still in contact with this day. We were like, why is she so bossy? And come to find out, she was the mother at the home because the mom was on drugs. So she had to take care of the kids. So for her to switch that off when she came to school, that was hard for her to navigate. And she was in sixth grade at the time.
Yeah.
And then another example, hopefully I can get her on a podcast. Her name is Paula Chase. In one of her books, Doughboys, one of the main characters, they play for what is like an AAU basketball team, but the basketball team is known for running drugs or being a lookout for drug dealers. That works for the basketball coach. And one of the guys really wants to run the drugs because he knows his mom is struggling. He's 12 years old. So, and then mom knows that he gets paid for being a doughboy, and was even trying to put the little brother on because that will bring more money into the household to help her. That I was like, what? So, but it's just like one of those things where, so what, as parents, like you mentioned, when grown folks are talking, you're told to leave the room. What are some other things we need to do as parents to make sure we're not, Jay, you even brought up how we would say little man, and and how we condone certain behaviors. So what's some more that we can do to make sure we're not adultifying or growing up our boys too fast?
I think the first thing we need to do is honestly, got to mature ourselves, and that's a learning process. I got a baby boy at home, and sometimes I can catch myself exhibiting some of those same behaviors I didn't like that my dad did. And so I have to really think back, okay, Jay, is this productive? Or are you just looking at it from a lens of what you think? Again, we talk about masculinity, right? Like you think he should be masculine. Like one of my boys' love language is physical touch. He just like hug. He's a little boy. He's a little boy. He like hugs. He like to wrestle. He slapped me and I hit him back. It's okay. But he likes physical touch. And so, I think that, for us as parents, mature ourselves, man. If you're still hurting the area, don't neglect or negate that area. It's a big roadblock. I know a lot of people, I won't say a lot, just whatever, but I know people who have hurt from the past who are neglecting their hurt, and and that's coloring their lenses with their own children, right? And so you were hurt in this area, and now everything bad is going to hurt. Everything bad is going to happen to this kid, or this kid needs to watch out for this. That's not even realistic, or that may not be as realistic. Those are different circumstances. So I think, one thing is maturing and looking in the mirror. One thing is also, depending on the age of the child, always remembering. You said you had. How old is your oldest? You got how many boys?
I got one.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 18.
But you've learned. You said you've learned a lot in that span, and so just being able to reflect positively about what is what and what's not, and don't feed into all. Again, social media. These are great conversations we're having on social media, but don't feed into some of that negativity on social media and what should be and what shouldn't be. Everybody's situation is different, and so realistically, some of those kids may have to be parents in the household. Like that is what it is. I can't take that away. I can't knock that. But if you're present as a parent and you've got the resources and the tools, talk to your kids, ask them how they're feeling. As you said once before too, Rihanna, you said, we like to huff and puff. We have to give the kids space to huff and puff, right? If they are not expressing their feelings, then what are they doing? They're repressing them. And so would you rather your child just repress their feelings and you never get that? I mean, or would you actually want to know how they feel? I remember when we first started, there was a story of a young lady that came down and yelled at her daddy and said, "I hate you. I can't stand you." And he was like all distraught about it, this, that, and the third. And, one of my mentors was like, I told her, would you rather her come down there and yell at you or just sit in that room and stew and never tell you that stuff? You can discipline how you discipline, but you need the information. So you got to give those kids space to do that. We can always discipline, not a problem. You might not do it again. but just give kids space. That's what I would say. Hopefully I didn't go too far around.
No.
Yeah, that's
Samir.
Yeah, I was just going to say, be strategic, plant seeds, so if there are, things that, that you may lack, that you may lack as a parent, as an adult, as a caregiver, whoever you may be, plant those seeds. And if you aren't able to model those behaviors, find your kid, depending on their age group, find them mentors. I think mentorship is definitely key. If there's, if there are local organizations that teach your kids about basic manners, if there are, local organizations that teach, your son chivalry, things of that nature, that teaches your daughter how to wear a dress a certain type of way. So I would just say, mentorship and really seeking those resources, because no matter what, communities that you come from, there are resources for us all. So I think for us as a community, we have not because we ask not, and if there are things that you see lack, in your own behaviors, in your own children's, behaviors and things of that nature, I think the biggest thing is just seeking help. One avenue we have is therapy. One avenue we have is tapping into your resources and things of that nature. And also it makes me think about, this thing called generational wealth. A lot of times, we think generational wealth as parents is monetary value. But a lot of times, generational wealth can come in the form of teaching your kids about masculinity and femininity, teaching your kids about love languages, teaching your kids about emotional intelligence. I used to be a teacher and in the school counselor. So, and one of the things that I used to do, I would, for my social emotional learning lessons, I would go to YouTube and type in literally social emotional learning for third graders, and they'll have books, resources, 3-minute videos that gives a guide on teaching kids how to respond instead of react, teaching kids how to, deal with anger and things of that nature. So I think really, just tapping into your resources in many different avenues, whether it's therapy, community resources, things of that nature, finding your kid mentors, things of that nature. It doesn't cost $1 to make improvement on your life.
And you brought up something that I completely forgot about, and I'll admit, me leaving the classroom after 20 years, that's something we started doing, I think, in the last 5 years, the social emotional learning, which I think is very beneficial. Can y'all speak more on that? What is that? And what can parents do at home to help teach that? Because I don't think it needs to, I think one of the reasons why they introduce it in school, so they feel like is something, there's a gap there. But I feel like this is something, if parents knew about it and they understood or cognizant of what it is, they would tap into it. Can y'all speak on that, please?
Yeah, I think social emotional learning is exactly what it says. Learning how to behave socially, knowing how to behave emotionally. Prime example is of course, respond instead of react. Those are qualities that I'm still having to reiterate to myself, even as a 29-year-old man who has a child on the way, who, and things of that nature. So I think social emotional learning is a never-ending quest, if that makes sense. But as it relates to just the basic foundation of what it is, it means exactly what it is, social emotional learning. And that how that manifests itself is through your behaviors, your reactions, the way how do you lead with grace? Is your first instinct to lead with anger? If something does happen to you, how do you respond to that? Do you react by attacking it, or do you respond? Do you think with a rational mind, or do you think with an irrational mind? Because I think in turn, and from a sort of theoretical perspective, when we, have reactions, and if we have adverse reactions, what that creates, it creates, mental health issues. It creates trauma. It creates not generational wealth, but the opposite of generational wealth. It creates generational trauma. So I think social emotional learning is the basic foundation on how we can, redirect what it is that we pass off to our kids.
I would just say, like you said, social emotional learning is exactly as the acronym is SEL, and it's still going back to, um, I guess, being able to regulate yourself. I think that's a big foundation of it, and that's something that I've seen personally in schools. Not demonizing any school, but as young black boys, especially, they can face sometimes they can face harsher disciplinary standards in school. So if you don't know how to regulate yourself, um, if you don't know how to regulate yourself, or you have a challenging time regulating yourself, you can change a lot in your life a lot quicker than some other folks demographics, right? And so uh, be cognizant of how you're relating, be cognizant of your emotions, and really teaching yourself some techniques and some tools to regulate your emotions. And again, as you said, Rian, as you said, Mr. Smith, like, everything is not in the control of schools. It starts with parents, and it starts with the community. It starts at home. I can tell you, unfortunate truth is, I can tell you a million times to do these breathing exercises, right? Um, and you might be able to do those to the best of your ability, but if you're going back to a toxic home environment, that can still be very challenging for you, and that's really the situation. So yeah.
Yeah, and I was just the piggyback off of that for just one moment. I'm sorry, y'all, but it makes me think about, you know, when you're in a disorganization, whether it's your thoughts or whatever, you know, disorganization brings chaos. Organization brings peace. So the more you're organized in your thoughts, you know, the more peace you'll have behind whatever decision that you make. And again, what that does is if you're organizing your thoughts, and the world could be falling apart. You know, you could be down your last. You know, you could be, you know, in whatever state of mind or whatever social economic status. But I think the biggest thing is if you're able to be organized in your thought process, in your emotional abilities, and your social abilities, you'll have a lot more clarity in whatever decision that you make. And again, back to young boys and even young females, you know, they'll be able to model those behaviors no matter the circumstances.
All right, so we see more people tuning in on Facebook and on Instagram. Please feel free to ask any questions or to say any comments. I would love to hear from you. I don't know if this is a question or just a statement. So there's this book. I want to say it's called Garbage Choice by Nikki Grimes, and in the book, the young man is definitely into art. He's definitely in astronomy. That his father is adamant that he needs to learn sports, that he needs to learn how to play football. I guess my question is, as a parent, we want these kids to be who they are created to be. So what do we need to do as parents to make sure we're allowing that to happen, if that makes sense?
First, Mrs. Mir,
You got a good brother.
All right. In terms, okay, so just in terms of sports and allowing kids to be, you know, what they are. Number one, I'll say this, at least about sports. Sports is a big industry with a lot of money behind it, and it trickles down from professional leagues, down to colleges, down to high schools, to middle schools, and everything. So sports is in your face. Everybody wants to be an athlete. Everybody will not be an athlete. You have to, you know, and I played some sports in school, but you know, you got to be cognizant. You got to learn your child. Every child's not going to be a superstar. Every child won't play every child won't play football, basketball, baseball, tennis, hockey, whatever. Really tap into your child, because there's so many other opportunities out there if you just open your eyes. Your child may be a world-class chess player. Your child may be captain of the debate club. Your child may be an amazing actor, an amazing artist. And I think sometimes, not all the times and not for everyone, but I think that sometimes, especially in our communities, like it's just like sports. Like we flock to AAU games that's $40 a game on the weekend, and you pay for personal training, for these children, and you pay for other things, but we're also not everybody. Sometimes we may not invest in them. We may not make that much of an investment in their education and in being grounded in other areas, because there's so many things to do. Like I went to a predominantly Black high school in the city here in Columbia, South Carolina, Eau Claire, Shamrocks forever. But we had some things to do. But when I would talk to my friends in other districts, they'd be like, yeah, we got this type of club. We got this type of club. We got this type of thing to do. And I'm like, wow, I got all that. And so, you know, I look back even now and I kind of wonder, like, if I had that, you know, to do, you know, what could have come from it. There can also be, and I hope I'm not going too far, Ms. Rian, but like, you know, there can also be, you know, pressures from the outside. So kids may feel pressures because they are, you know, in drama or debate or whatever the case may be. And you kind of have to have, and I've had friends tell me specifically, or mentors tell me specifically, like I had to push my child past whatever their friends were telling them. And I can even remember myself in ninth grade, I was first year All-State in violin, first year All-State back when it was something. And I thought, I think maybe somebody picked me or something. And then I got too cool to play violin. I could be traveling the world right now playing violin. But that's just the thing, like tap into what your kids are good at. Don't look at what what your innermost desires are, because we were talking about the good of the kid. We're talking about the good of the kid. And again, we're trying to find that special thing within them because they're all different. And I think a lot of times, I'm going to say this, I'm going to hush my mouth, Mr. Smith.
You good, man. You good.
I think a lot of times we pigeonhole ourselves. We want to make Black people a monolith, and we want to make ourselves one thing, and we are many things. And I hope we continue to snap out of that. And be all the things we were created to be.
Oh man, that's amazing. So it made me think about something. So man, it's amazing that you mentioned that you posed this question. So Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu has a book called Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And one of the examples that he included in that was that you have about 1 million Black boys that play high school sports. Of that 1 million Black boys, only about 20,000 or 40,000 of them will play college basketball. Of that 20,000, only about 400 goes to play in. Matter of fact, of that 20,000, only 400 people go to the NBA, possibly. Of those 400 NBA teams, you have about 15 guys on the roster, 12 guys on the rosters. You have about 7 guys who truly play, 5 guys in the starting lineup. So think about this. You got 1 million Black boys fighting for 5 full-time jobs. The chances of that happening is slim to none. You can even equate that to being a rapper being a rapper. Another thing that I sort of started to charge myself to do is, and I also have a background in tailoring and being an image consultant and things of that nature. I go back to this idea of imagery. The people that kids look up to are the rappers, the basketball players, things of that nature. I have a line brother who wants to be a dentist, and his whole thing is his mission is to be a dentist. But his other mission is to inspire young other Black boys who comes from the inner city of Atlanta to be dentists as well. So what he does is, in his appearance, he dressed up like a rapper. So in turn, what that does is it has the young Black 9-year-old little boy like, dang, okay, look at Mr. Ali. He looks cool. Are you a rapper? No, I'm a dentist, man. Dang, Mrs. Amir, you got on the new Balenciagas. You got on that. Are you a rapper, basketball player? No, man, I'm a therapist, man. So I think imagery, is important as well. And also too, it's interesting you guys said it. My one of my good friends, he was at an entrepreneur conference yesterday, and he said, let's stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. Let's start asking them what problems they want to solve and what do they need to learn in order to solve them. That's my answer.
And it's something that I was watching a video on Instagram, and it was a tech conference, and she said, stop trying to come up with the product. Think about the problem first that you're trying to solve. And from that, the money will come, the product will come. But just speaking on what y'all were just saying about the different things, like I'll admit, I'm a huge sports fanatic. Anyone who knows me, I am sports. So when I had my son, I just knew I just knew I'll be that parent throwing out the games because what you're not going to do is go do bad calls. And I had a son who he played sports simply because he wanted to make friends. Not saying he didn't have friends, but he was the only child. And that was his way of when we left school, he would go to practice and he would be able to hang out with some other people other than the kids he played with at school. But I realized real quick, my son is not an athlete. And I need to be okay with that. And it took me a minute because I had this perception, and it wasn't really a male thing, if I'm being honest, because both me and my brother were athletes in the family. We were athletic. Even my mom, she didn't play sports in school, but she was athletic. My dad was athletic. So it was like one of those things I expected him. But once we found out that this boy loved Legos, he loved to draw, we made sure that he was in programs that foster that learning. I remember USC had a drawing program, so he did that. Even to the point now, when he graduated from Ridgeview, he was part of their arts magnet. So it's like finding what he really loved, and it never failed because my son, he doesn't claim to be 6'2", but I really think he is 6'2". It never fails. What is the question y'all think they always ask him when they see him?
You play basketball?
Yes.
Play basketball?
You ball? And when he says, nah, why you got that? Can my son be tall and lanky and not ball? I mean, is he athletic? Yes. But is he trying to play sports? No. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yep. And I just wonder why with our boys, we're so, and we do it with our girls too, but with our boys especially, we pushed them so hard. And I'm not saying you're not going to make it to the league. I'm not saying you're not going to make it as a rapper. But matter of fact, if y'all get a chance, go back on my YouTube page. I actually sat down with two of my former students who were both stellar students, but they were stellar athletes. And I honestly thought they were going to make it to the league. One of them actually tried out, but it did not work out. He was an awesome cornerback. But what I loved about them and admired about their families is these boys were involved in school. They did their work. I don't think there was one time I did not see them on honor roll. And there are two Black men who are successfully doing the doggone thing. But that's because not all their focus, like you mentioned, Jay, how, and it irks my nerves when the amount of money that parents invest in your child's sports, but your child can't read. So why don't we take some of that money and get a tutor? And tutoring doesn't cost as much as we need. Or why do we feel a need to buy our kids 50 million pair of Jordans? Like, I am still flabbergasted about the amount of money that people paid on Jordans. But we don't go to a museum. We don't go, nothing wrong with going to Myrtle Beach, but why can't we go someplace like the African American Museum, which I'm at, I still need to go in DC or Charleston, or the Harvey B. Gantt Museum, the African American Museum in Charlotte, the art museum there. Little places where they can learn things, taking them to plays. Like I remember us going to see Ron and Natalie Days from Gullah Gullah Island at Morris College. We still went to Carowinds, but my mom and dad, granted, they were both college educated, made sure we had that balance. And I need us as parents to make sure that we're providing that balance for our kids, and especially for our boys, and not automatically assume they're going to be athletes. They may not be an athlete. They may be, as you were saying, you played the violin. So imagine if you would have had that encouragement, what you could be doing now with the violin. So it's so much more. So hopefully we would get some more questions. If not, I think I have one last question, and let me look at my list to make sure I'm not skipping over something. Is there a such thing as boys need certain things developmentally than girls in the early years? Like, is there certain things that you can do with boys and girls, or is it different?
I would say, boys and girls are different. So we started them being anatomically different, right? We're different. It is what it is. We think differently. I think Jeff and Shanti Felden wrote 2 separate books, Married Couple, about the differences between men and women. data, clinical data. So I mean, yeah, boys and girls are different. I think they will be parented differently. Whatever fair is, let's make it like uniform as far as how we treat them, them. I think that boys definitely need some healthy role models and healthy male role models. I think they may process emotions. I think they do process emotions differently from girls. And I'm not talking about like external factors, like somebody saying you need to be a man, but I think they process it a little differently. I think they still require those safe spaces, which I don't think there are enough of for young boys, which is why they're on Instagram grabbing girls by the neck, because that's something else. But they face a lot of local and social pressure to like suppress their emotion. And so I think that for us going forward, I think that we have to really, if I'm answering the question, I think that we really have to give boys the space to be boys, to quote unquote grow into men. Me personally, I've got a son and a daughter, and so it's just the typical stuff. My daughter does have me wrapped around her finger, but my boy does too. And so if there is a difference, I would just say there may be a difference in how a parent approaches or a caregiver or a mentor approaches that relationship. But listen to the child. Believe what they tell you. If they're having conversations, because once they get past a certain age, they'll tell you what they think, and they're a lot more. They can be a lot more. I don't want to say intelligent, but that's the best word I've got right now. They can be a lot more intelligent and mature than what we think. They still have a lot of growing to do. But I would just say listen to them, and try to guide them in the way that they need to be guided, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, with that answer, there's so many different avenues that you can go with. I think, but the fundamental foundational thing that I believe that a young man should, have is dependent on, his learning style, is dependent on, the way he processes things. But also, I think that one of the important things, she's pregnant, so I don't have a son yet. But one of the things that I didn't get was, again, I think it goes back to the parents, but I think that one of the things that I didn't receive I saw my mom be sort of the masculine, sort of breadwinner of the family. Not saying that, my dad wasn't, but there were things that he sort of struggled with, and I kind of grew up with two dads, and my other father, he was, sort of like, having his own things that he was dealing with. So I saw my mom be sort of like this masculine she was like the prominent, eminent, figure. So a lot of my ways were, I don't want to necessarily use the word feminine, but a lot of my ways were feminine. I never really had a good balance. Granted, I was always a good person, had good manners, things of that nature, but there were a lot of tendencies that I did like, and I saw that manifest, as I got older. But one of the things that I want to be intentional about in my son's, sort of development is that I want to be sort of and this is just the one, I'm not sure how it was going to look, but when they get here, but one thing I was, cognizant with my fiance was, I want to be sort of the disciplinarian, to our son, not necessarily in a way of punishing him when he does something wrong, but having that man in his life to allow for him to possibly deflect certain situations or give him those social emotional learning skills that a man needs to have as it relates to dealing with society, with the woman, you know, in the context of being in a classroom setting, working with kids in a classroom setting, and I told his and I, sort of asked my fiance to be sort of that motherly, my mom has my back sort of,
A
model,
nurturer.
yeah, that nurture in his life, because I think it's important to have that balance, so that when my son does seek a wife, he knows what he has an idea of what he would want in the context of a mate. So I think it just goes back to that foundational piece, which is modeling those behaviors for him. That way it leads to him having his his sense of development, and also as a parent leading with grace. And that's one of the things I can teach my son is you have to have grace, you have to have a sense of empathy and forgiveness. That's the first thing that Brother Little, that's the first thing we learn in our master's program is empathy. So yeah.
So and honestly, as I'm sitting here, I'm already thinking this is definitely going to be a part 2, part 3, part 4, 5, 6. So, and because there's so many other questions that are coming to mind, but we're almost out of time. But is there anything, any takeaways, any last points that y'all want to share as it relates to what we discussed tonight, or any main points you want to, drive home as we close?
I would say, again, I think this is just a part of the conversation. I see what you're saying. There's so much to it. So much to it. And this is a conversation I believe is being had a lot more, which is good. But if there's any takeaway, if there are any takeaways, again, that little boy, that young man is not one thing. Don't try to put them in a box. Allow those children and allow those young men to be who they are naturally. We have, we have roles as parents, as again mentors, as caregivers to support those children, but support those children again. You do the best to make them the best they can be, but allow them to be who they already are inside, just to support them to be their best.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think what and I know I keep saying this word, but modeling, that word modeling, whether it comes in many different shapes and forms. Modeling it yourself, if you are unable to model it yourself, tap into your resources, expose your young boy to things that exemplifies what it means to be a good human being, what it means to not be narrow-minded as it relates to, just sticking with sports, and, what it means to lead with grace, empathy, so it goes back to that word of modeling and really being intentional on, the way you move, and things of that nature, because I think the biggest thing we want to leave generational wealth. But again, wealth doesn't always comes in the form of monetary value, but it comes in the form of good character. It can come in the form of characteristics. It can come in the form of trauma. It can come in the form of positive development and cognitive stability. So that's all I got.
It's tough. So I'm like, literally, as they're talking, I'm thinking about more topics and more things. And I really look forward to reaching out. If it's just individually, and there's other guys who have reached out to me, because I actually had a whole list of either therapists or counselors who said, yeah, I would love to have this discussion that I will bring on, because I definitely believe that our boys are so precious, but it's so much more that we can do to ensure. One of the inspirations behind my new children's book that's coming out, initially the title was going to be He is perfect for this world. And then we cut it down and we put He is the blessing for this world. And it's inspired based on my son, who was very well mannered, who was very respectful. But one of the things that I know that helped that happen is because, like you said, modeling. I also made an environment conducive where he could talk to me, where he could voice his emotions, where he could be very transparent and say some things that I know if I said it to my mom, someone will have to dig me up from the grave. Like, she was not playing like that. It was certain things you just didn't say, and I think I learned from that. So this is to be continued for sure. So although we're about to log off in a second, y'all guys make sure y'all stay on. I have some things I want to tell you before we end, but we're about to end the broadcast. Before we end the broadcast, my next broadcast will be next Tuesday at 7:00. We're still working on the specifics on where we're going to air it, because they want us to do it in person. But it's two of my poetry brothers, Chris O and TK Take Care, who we literally had a show planned twice and it got canceled. We were the three featured poets, and they canceled the show. One was Hurricane Helene, and the other one, the place closed down without us knowing. So we are going to have our own live poetry show. We may do that at Richland Library. We haven't decided yet, but once we decided, please don't tune in either YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. You will see us compose poetry. We may even bring some poets on to perform. We will see, but it's basically us having a roundtable discussion. The next podcast from there, stay tuned. You will see what is happening. And again, y'all keep tuning in, keep watching it. Please know that this will be posted on YouTube forever. Facebook, it will be up for about 24 hours, and then I will take it down, but it's on YouTube forever. And then by tomorrow morning, you will be able to see this on Spotify, Apple. Well, I don't think I'm on Apple yet, but Amazon Music, where you find your podcast. I am there now, which is so awesome sauce. Nice. So please tune in, share this with people, have a dialogue, have a discussion. Let me know how everything is going. If you want to follow me on social media, I am everywhere. I'm trying the Blue Sky. I don't know how I feel about it yet. And then you have, and then of course you have Zamir here. You can follow him on Instagram. You have Jay Little, who he said he's not on social media like that, but you can contact him on his website if y'all have any questions. Jay, you're located here in Columbia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still at the office right now. Still at the office right now.
Okay. And Zamir, you're in Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm in Charlotte. I live in TK, which is right there. So I'm in South Carolina.
Just in case people are looking for resources, they know where you're located. And I know I have people viewing for all over the place. But again, thank y'all so much for joining, and y'all have a good night.
All right, y'all. Y'all have a good one, y'all.
Take it easy.
Have a good night.